The LA Clippers have been an interesting watch in preseason, and one of the main takeaways has been the performances of Bones Hyland. And I've seen a lot of Clipper fans say that the way Bones Hyland is playing makes Norman Powell more expendable. And in this episode, I'm going to tell you why I think Norman Powell is still very key for this Clipper team in their title quest this season. On today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA and going into my 19th season as a Clipper fan. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more NBA and LA sports content. And Locked On Clippers, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where I want you to let me know how you feel about the way Bones Hyland has been playing and if it makes Norman Powell expendable. So let me just go with a yes or no. Do you think Norman Powell is expendable? And if you want to elaborate, please do so. And if you want to say anything about the Clippers, go ahead in the comment section. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. There's no better time to bet on things than right now. You got the NBA season coming up, so many preseason predictions about various things. You got the baseball playoffs, MLB playoffs right now, NFL season, so FanDuel is the place to be, but Locked On Clippers is also the place to be for this episode, which is going to be about Norman Powell. A lot of people have been talking to me, about Bones is playing so well. He's that guy that can come in and energize and get us buckets off the bench. Why do we need Norman Powell? Let me tell you something. I'm going to talk about a couple of reasons why I don't believe that that's true. One is consistency. The other is getting to the basket, getting to the foul line, rim pressure. And then another one is knowing a role. I'm going to start out with consistency. The main reason why people are totally overreacting with this, is because they're going off of 2 preseason games, one of which Norman Powell shot 0 for 6. Like, these are the people that are going to overreact to preseason games and just make these rash takes. I mean, this isn't my first rodeo. Bones Hyland very well should be taking a leap this year from the early signs. Now, again, don't want to contradict myself. I just said preseason's not a big deal. But Bones has been given the freedom and confidence to be that backup point guard, not only by the coaching staff and bringing him in, but by the players. You see how enthusiastic Kawhi Leonard is about anything Bones Hyland does when he's on his team. He's talking about him. He's the backup point guard, all this with conviction. That's got to give a young player like Bones confidence, a guy who was kind of pushed out of the rotation in Denver and was really upset about it, but now he's been given the green light. Here's the thing. Bones is still very streaky when it comes to scoring. What I want Bones Hyland to be for the Clippers this season is a guy that doesn't need to be hitting his shots to be effective. That comes with his playmaking, and that comes with him playing defense and really buying in like he has during preseason throughout the duration of the season. Now, again, I'm going to repeat. He allegedly, or apparently, I should say, better word, has put on 11 pounds according to the broadcast, the Clipper broadcast, so far in preseason. He looks a little bigger. You see him putting work on the Clipper Instagram. But what I liked was that he absorbed a couple of hits in those 2 games against the Jazz and caused misses or played good enough defense for misses. And that's all you want to see. That's all you want to see because he brings good things offensively. And he's a very underrated passer. But that's why I think Norman Powell is not necessarily a redundant thing with Bones. Bones is kind of an on-ball guy. He can play off the ball in terms of catching and shooting. He had a nice back cut with Mason Plumlee on the court in one of the preseason games. But overall, he is good with the ball in his hands. He likes to dance. Norman Powell is better, in my opinion, working quickly off the catch and sometimes in dribble handoff situations where he's on the move. I'm not a huge fan of Norman Powell isolation. Not a huge fan. He can still do it. He's got a great, strong right-hand drive, strong shoulder that he puts into somebody, gets to the foul line really well, but doesn't necessarily have a bag, so to speak. He's not super creative with his handle, not amazing at creating space, but he really can get downhill. I don't think it's redundant with Bones Hyland. The thing about Bones is he's still very streaky. And even if he's an improved defender, he's still not going to be some lockdown guy or some great defender all of a sudden. Norman Powell, what he brings is that consistency scoring the basketball off the bench. He brings that consistency. Bones Hyland is still very streaky, young player. Norman Powell has proven to be consistent. There were stretches last season where he was a guaranteed 18 points. And people were in the comment section of this channel saying, no, I don't agree with these at all, but saying Norman Powell was our second best player, not Paul George, because you're gonna know what you're getting from him every night and he maximizes his talent. Please. That's disrespectful to Paul George. But Norman Powell was our third best player before we got Russell Westbrook. There's no question about it. He was playing so well. He was consistent. And I think that's what people are missing. People are overreacting to these preseason games. Norman Powell starts the season poorly. At least he started the season poorly last season. Maybe that's just a thing for him. He might start the season poorly. He comes off the bench. He will be fine. I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to get back to that 16 points a game. I mean, his stats last season, I think they'll be a little lower this upcoming season because hopefully he's not going to have to do as much scoring the ball because we'll have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard healthier. But in the 60 games that he played, and that's still a good chunk of games missed, by the way, 22 games missed for a guy that's our third leading scorer, 17 points a game. And his efficiency is just fantastic. 48% from the field, 40% from three, and 81 from the line. That's awesome for a role player. Shoots 12 shots a game. When you're shooting that efficiently, is it a big deal? I didn't have much of a problem with Norman Powell shooting the ball besides the first couple of games of the season when he was starting and I thought he was really forcing it. But besides that, I think he settled into his role really nicely, and in the postseason, he averaged 22 points on 47% shooting, 41% from three. And he had that amazing game 3 that I attended. It was awesome. You want to check out the vlog for that, go to Dime Dropper channel. But Norm, I think he's a great sixth man that'll come in and get you buckets, and he's consistent at it. And I don't think Bones Hyland showing some signs of major improvement, which I think he will majorly improve this season. I really feel like he will. That doesn't mean Norman Powell's expendable. Norman Powell, especially if you're anti-James Harden trade. If you're anti-James Harden trade, look, Russell Westbrook's not the same scorer he once was. I said he's our third option, meaning he's our third best player. He's going to have the ball in his hands basically as much as anyone. He should be taking the third or fourth most shots in a game, on average. But he's still our third best player. Russell Westbrook, the thing about Norman Powell is he's just a great scorer. I like that he's versatile in the sense that he can play off the ball. He doesn't have to have the ball in his hands. He's not very good with the ball in his hands, really, at the NBA level. When it comes to being a high-level scorer, he's a good scorer. Very good. But high level, he needs to have more juice on the ball. It is good to have guys that don't need to have the ball to create all the time, though. Just quick off the catch, you need those guys to play around stars. And he was great in his role off the bench for Toronto when he won the championship. But Russell Westbrook, he does the things that Norman Powell doesn't do. Rebounds, makes up, gets assists, but really is a good passer. Norman Powell is not a good passer. Westbrook, you've seen him play. He's the best passer on the Clippers. And just a better ball handler, just a better overall player. But Norm, he might be and probably is our third best scorer. Probably is our third best scorer. He's very consistent in what he does. And coming up, I'm going to talk about why he is so consistent at what he does. I got to tell you a little something about FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Just a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. Large range of betting options, including spreads, over-unders, player props, and everything else you need. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right. Let's talk about Norm some more. Why, in my opinion, he is not expendable. So, Norm, the thing he does well that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, quite frankly, don't do that well relative to other #1 and 2 options around the league is get to the foul line and get to the rim. Norman Powell, alongside Austin Reeves, has the best whistle in Los Angeles. Paul George doesn't get any calls. Westbrook, it's mediocre, I'd say. LeBron, for all the calls he got in his career, he has not gotten many calls the last 2 years. Although after the Lakers started crying against Boston, then he started getting every call. So forget I said that. But before that, he wasn't getting a very good whistle. Kawhi, I think he gets a decent one, honestly. When he gets fouled, he complains. Like he really does. The one thing about Kawhi I'll say is that he always gets back on defense, though. He'll always get back on defense, unlike some other guys. I'm not going to name names, even when he's complaining. But the point is, Norman Powell gets a great whistle. He's got that knack of getting to the rim and also just getting to the line. Every single time he gets hand-checked, he'll just flail and throw a shot up there, and they give it to him for some reason. Lou Williams had the same thing when he was with the Clippers. Other stars don't even get that. And Norm gets calls, like when he gets any bump, he sells it so well. It is a skill. It absolutely is a skill that I did not have as a basketball player growing up. But Norman Powell absolutely does, and you need that on a team that lacks it. Even Bones Hyland. Does Bones Hyland get to the line that much? Not really. So let's look at I'm going to look at the stats right now, free throw attempts. So Kawhi Leonard averaged 5.4, Paul George 5.3, and Norman Powell 4.6. And Norman Powell averages 26 minutes a game, while the others average 35 and 34 minutes a game. So you can kind of catch my drift. Norman, you could say I'm making it sound like Norm is way better at getting to the line, but he gets to the line more for the minutes that he plays. I bet if we looked up like per 75 possessions or something, the stats would favor Norm in that respect. But obviously, I'm not saying anything, Norm is not close to Kawhi and Paul George as a basketball player, but we need that stuff. Bones Hyland, yeah, he gets to the rim. He's quick, but he's still... I want to see how the 11 pounds shows itself offensively for him. But Norm has that running back build. He gets to the rim, and he gets that shoulder into you, and he's scoring. He's got that quick jump, if that makes sense. He just elevates quickly and seems to get... Especially going from left to right. That curl with Zubats last season, you're going to see that a lot again, especially with Plumlee as well coming off the bench. Some fake handoffs maybe with Plumlee, I would assume. That dribble, or that little curl play with Norm, or a dribble handoff, with him coming from left to right and turning that corner. The tough part is Norm's passing out of it. Sometimes he doesn't connect on that little scoop underneath dump off pass to the big. That's kind of the only pass I can really picture in my head of Norm Powell like making a good pass. Is that pass where he curls from left to right, gets to the basket, and then dumps it off when he gets the big in the air to like Zoo or Mason Plumlee. But besides that, I can't remember anything about Norm like diming anyone. But he is just great getting downhill. Hopefully you just get 2 points out of that with Norm. He's fantastic going from left to right. So moral of the story, when I say the rim pressure, that means his ability to get to the basket. We need someone like that. Westbrook, yes, he can do that, But you've got to remember, teams are really going to sag off Russ. So it's a little harder for him to get to the basket than Norm. Norm, while he doesn't have the on-ball creation of Russ, attacking closeouts, he's the best on the team. There's no doubt about that. And teams are going to close out on him because last season, the man, I repeat, shot 40% from three. 39.7 if you want to be very exact. 40% from three. So teams are going to close out on that. And if you remember that game against New York, when they closed out in the corner, he absolutely baptized Julius Randle. It was crazy. So Norm Powell, I don't think just because Bones Hyland has been good in preseason, we lack what Norman Powell brings. Now, for the crowd that wants James Harden, talking about getting to the line, yes, James Harden does get to the line, not like he used to, but he does not get to the rim and elevate the same way that Norman Powell does, not even close right now. And so Norman Powell brings us a little bit of a different dimension, and if we want to play fast, like it looks like we want to based on our body language in the games, the way we're actually playing, and what they keep preaching, then Norman Powell is a great guy to have because he wants to get downhill, and he's pretty good in transition. And coming up, I'm going to be talking about why I like Norman Powell in his role for the people that want James Harden. Going to be talking about that coming up. All right. So this one really goes out to the people that want James Harden, because the one thing I like about Norm is that, in my eyes, we don't need a third star. I consider Westbrook that third guy. I think he's a star caliber player. Won't be an all-star ever again, in my opinion. I would love to be wrong on that, but I just don't see it. That's okay. I don't think we need a third star. The Denver Nuggets didn't have a third star. Aaron Gordon was fantastic in his role. You can make an argument in 2022 that Draymond and Clay didn't necessarily play like stars throughout the playoffs, but they were definitely star caliber. I don't think the Clippers need 3 stars outright. I think that third guy is mainly going to be Russell Westbrook, but Norman Powell, in terms of scoring, will be that third guy. And it could be any third guy on a given night. And I like that because it puts the onus on Kawhi and Paul George, mainly Paul George, it's not about Kawhi, on Paul George to be aggressive. And you're the second guy, man. Like, we have shot creation, but we don't have unlimited shot creation. But what we're going to do is maximize our defense. You don't have to play as hard on that end by having Terrence Mann play more minutes and having Robert Covington and not having Marcus Morris in the rotation, which, fingers crossed, hoping that that happens because we've seen signs of it in the preseason, but I don't want to get too excited. Now, Norm, he comes out every preseason with us. The 2 seasons he's been with us on Media Day, he has said he wants to be an all-star. We don't need Norman Powell to be an all-star. We need Norman Powell to be Norman Powell. And I hate that me, a guy that's not in the NBA, that's talking on a podcast, sounds like I'm trying to limit an individual. But Norman Powell's 30 years old. We know who he is at this stage of his career. A mediocre defender at best. Some people think he's just awful at defense. And I didn't see awful last season. I would like you to elaborate on that. I mean, if you think he's just terrible, moving his feet laterally, terrible off the ball, doesn't know our coverages, and when I say our coverages, for those that don't know what that means, for example, we're playing someone, and we're switching on this guy. We're blitzing Luka Doncic. We're playing drop coverage with Zoo when Rashawn Holmes sets the screen with Kyrie in the pick and roll. These kind of things. Knowing your coverages, just knowing where you're supposed to be, knowing what the team's doing. If you're telling me he's awful at all those things, I mean, I don't see that. I think Norman Powell's very passable on defense. He was in a championship rotation, for crying out loud. I think he has some games where he's poor defensively, but the thing is, he was playing with some really bad defensive lineups to start the season. Lineups with John Wall, Luke Kennard, and no center protecting them. I mean, are you kidding me? Clippers think it was so funny. We thought we could switch 1 through 5 with that. 1 through 5 with 1 or 2 good defenders. Like, they're obviously going to put the weaker ones in the pick and roll, and then they get by you, and then you've got 6'8" guys trying to act like they're Dikembe Mutombo sitting there, or Zoo. I mean, come on. It was ridiculous. Those are going to make the numbers look worse when it comes to Norman Powell's defense and whatever metrics you want to use. I want to hear some actual criticism of Norman Powell, the basketball player, and his defensive errors. I don't think he's great laterally. I don't think he's great off the ball. I don't think he always puts all his attention to defense. But when he wants to be in big games and throughout the duration of the season, I didn't have many complaints about Norm's defense. It was hit or miss. And in the playoffs, it was fine. It was fine. I think he's a better defender than Harden. I don't think the gap is that big, though. It's like Harden, I think he gets a lot of, ished for his defense, but he's a better defender than people think just because he's strong and he has good hands. But, again, defense is very much an effort thing, very largely. When you're 6'4" or 6'5" and built like James Harden and Norman Powell, and you try a little bit, you can be decent. You really can. And James Harden has much better hands than Norm. I would take Norman Powell defensively over Harden, but it's just not a great conversation. Let's put it that way. I like Norm, though, because he knows his role. We bring in James Harden. He's going to have the ball in his hands. Now we have like a super team, legitimately. And then it's like, with Russ and Harden in the game together, yeah, when they're staggered, it'll be fine. But when they're in the game together, it's going to be clunky. You have Russ off the ball more. Team's just going to sag off. I don't know. Do you take away Russ's joy again? With LeBron, another ball-dominant, amazing creator, and a better one than Harden, you just kind of took away what Russ did, what we brought Russ in to do. And Russ doesn't seem to want to go to the bench. So when it comes to knowing the role, that doesn't just apply to Harden. That comes to everyone that's going to have to be adjusted if he comes. Westbrook, Bones Hyland's going to have less minutes, less opportunities in pick and roll and handling the ball. With Norman Powell, he's going to be a sixth man. We know that's coming. And he will embrace that and be great at it. And I'm okay with that. It comes down to Russell Westbrook playing at the way I think he can play. I'm not going to do a projection on him statistically or anything like that. Next week is where you're going to get that. But when you're going to get that. But I think Russell's going to be great this season. I really do. I also think if we actually think about what's going to make this team better long term, we look to make Zoo more of a go-to guy. They keep saying they're gonna in media day and training camp, but let's see when the rubber meets the road, opening night against Portland, if we're really throwing the ball down to Zoo. Right now he's got back spasms. Norman Powell has a little groin injury. Apparently Marcus Morris has a groin injury, but we saw some good video of him shooting around today at the Clippers training facility in Playa Vista. So that's good to see. Good to see. But yeah, Norman Powell knows his role at the end of the day. He comes out with that all-star comment, but give it a couple of games. He's going to be back to that sixth man of the year candidate that he was before he got hurt. Because he absolutely was. And then he had the shoulder injury. But I trust Norman Powell. He's a champion, and I want champions on this roster. I'm not down to just trade champions like that. He's going to be fine. Got to be patient. Got to be behind him. People saw somebody DMing him slander after a preseason game. Like, dude, shame on you. But anyway, that's it for me in this one. Let me know if you think Norman Powell is expendable. I like what he does and what he brings to this ball club. Knows his role. He's very consistent, and he gets to the rim and gets to the line, and we need that. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper, LA Sports, NBA content. And, of course, Locked On Clippers. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video. All things LA Clippers 5 days a week. We're the only channel that does this. How about that? How about that? Clipper Nation. This is the place to be. For the second season for me, 2023-24. Here we come. We are not that far away. The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.